Welcome to the channel. Today, we're exploring some unbelievable story. Stay tuned and let's dive in. As I became older, I recognized that life would be a journey full of challenges and unforeseen twists. My father instilled in me the value of persistence, which would be vital in the future. Early on, I realized that determination and unshakable concentration might be the major differences between success and failure. When I began my professional career, these teachings informed every decision I made, particularly when I joined the tough world of chemical supply. Before long, I was directing teams, juggling family responsibilities, and dealing with the pressures of a profession that demanded continual energy. I accepted these challenges, but they came with hidden consequences, especially when it came to spending time with my family. Balancing work and family life became a tricky performance, particularly when new job prospects brought more obligations. One Saturday night, I was in my office, evaluating applications from potential applicants for a position in our department. As the regional manager of a chemical supply firm specializing in soil enhancers, fertilizers, and weed control chemicals, I saw that our success was inextricably linked to the agricultural community we serviced. With the increased focus on sustainable practices, our firm took satisfaction in being a trailblazer, ensuring that our goods fulfilled the most stringent environmental safety requirements. Two of my office staff members were departing because their spouses had just been promoted, which meant they would be moving within the next 4 months. The need to locate replacements was great. Our sales team served 8 states in the heart of the Midwest, and sales growth this year exceeded expectations. Sophia, my executive assistant, came into my office and said, "Ethan, all 8 candidates have confirmed their interview slots for Monday. I'm leaving now, so good night." Every Saturday, I traveled to one of the states in my region to conduct a half-day sales meeting before returning home. This meant that Saturday nights had become my wife's time to socialize with her friends. Over the years, this habit resulted in enormous childcare bills. My weekly visits provided our sales representatives with valuable face-to-face help to handle work-related challenges and enhance their performance. This strategy proved to be quite beneficial over time. In 9 years, I hadn't lost a single team member, which was a huge accomplishment in the firm. Today, I returned just in time to go over a few duties before departing home. For years, the corporation had urged me to relinquish this aspect of my work. However, I valued the time alone since it enabled me to reflect in my own manner. With a wife who was always ready to provide counsel and 3 children at home, the quiet time I spent driving was vital. Furthermore, it saved our branch the expense of employing a sales manager. I had regularly kept my spending under control and planned to maintain them that way. With all of our children now in junior and senior high school, and my eldest son, my pride and pleasure, about to graduate and begin college at Rockford College in the fall, things were looking up for our family. He had gotten a full scholarship from my job. My youngest daughter had just turned 17 and was studying for her learner's permit. Melissa, my 22-year-old wife, had worked as the district attorney's executive assistant since the year before our youngest child was born. He had just been offered and accepted a new position as a federal government lawyer. The officials seemed to welcome his direct attitude. Turning it down would have been silly since it paid twice as much. He would start in 4 months. I never fully figured him out. He was around my age, but had never married. I wasn't certain, but despite the allegations, I didn't think he was not straight. My parents have picked up my 3 children every second weekend of the month for the last 14 years, allowing my wife and me to spend valuable time together. When they initially began this, my wife and I were at a crossroads in our marriage. My parents thought we needed alone time without the kids. I have to say that it was the nicest present they could have given us since it gave my wife and myself the opportunity to reconnect. Without their assistance, we may have been another divorce statistic. We barely had approximately 4 months left until Nathan, my eldest, began his post-secondary studies in political science. My father, on a whim, purchased a kit from Ancestry.com for each of my 3 children with my permission and sent them in as a light-hearted experiment. According to the guidelines, there would only be a match if a relative also submitted their DNA to the software. My children discussed it with me, and I gave them the go-ahead, explaining that everyone has distant relatives they don't remember or know, and that it may lead to a new experience for all of us. Nathan advised that we keep it a surprise for their mother until we got the findings. We understood it may take 6 or 7 months to get a response. This weekend, we plan to visit the National Music Hall in Seattle and return on Sunday. My wife had planned this particular vacation to make another treasured memory for us. I met my wife Melissa during a football game in my last year of university. No, I was not a player on the field. I was one of the underappreciated laborers serving food to the throng at exaggerated costs. She was one of the medical coach's youngest daughters, therefore she was always eligible for complimentary tickets. That day, she got into a fight with her date over something petty, which one of them misinterpreted. One thing led to another, and I became caught in the midst. She pushed him and moved away, and he didn't notice, striking me from behind with full power. I went down the concrete stairs, my meal tray flying. I awoke in the hospital, my head bandaged. The doctor informed me that I need 28 stitches owing to a split forehead. Melissa may have felt bad since she visited me every day to ensure my well-being. She met my whole family before I recovered consciousness. I eventually learned that I had been in a coma for about a week owing to internal damage. As my eyesight cleared, I saw an unusual lady standing before me, dazzling as a goddess. At first, I assumed I had arrived at heaven's gates, that she was my guardian angel. Then I saw my fiancée, Jessica, standing alongside her, underwhelmed by the scene before her. I closed my eyes and fell back asleep, thinking that when I awoke, Jessica would be gone and that this was all a dream. When I awakened, the scene remained the same, but Jessica was no longer there. She'd chosen to move on and find someone else to lavish her with adoration. It seemed like my prayers had been answered. Melissa remained by my side and asked for nothing. I never asked for it as I carefully rebuilt my life, but we eventually started dating. One thing led to another, and after graduating, I moved into sales, while she got her first job as an executive assistant. During a family gathering, her small cousin inquired why she wasn't married yet, to which she answered, "Because Ethan hasn't asked me." 3 months later, I stood at the altar, watching Melissa come toward me like a goddess. She was 59 with long blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and a body that turned heads. We were married, but by our 5th year, we were both ready to walk away. I still don't know what pushed us apart, and neither does she. As far as I knew, we had just left the Evergreen Diner on our way home. To me, it was a restaurant surviving on its reputation, with the main attraction being the servers tossing large bread rolls across the room for customers to catch, but the rest of the food was outdated and overcooked. We stopped there because it reminded my wife of her mother's home cooking, and that's all I need to say. My wife suddenly went over and switched down the sound system, indicating that she had something important to communicate. I reached into my jacket pocket and put on my voice recorder, a practice I had when recording private discussions that would need to be verified later. "Ethan," my wife Melissa said, "have you ever considered having an affair?" My initial thinking was, where is this coming from? My second thought was, why is she asking this? Was she having one, or did she know someone who was? Why did she feel it was necessary to bring it up now? I put these concerns aside before replying. "Let me be honest, Melissa," I responded. "Everyone has considered having an affair at some time. The bigger question is, have I ever followed through on it?" And the answer is no. "Why not?" she asked. "Because when I said my vows on our wedding day, I said they meant something to me, and they still do." Melissa said that marriage vows no longer carry the same significance as they previously did due to societal changes. "I believe you should let go of that thinking and look for a female partner with whom you are compatible. If guilt is holding you back, consider this my permission. You have my unwavering permission to go on. It could even help you appreciate our connection and have a better sense of who we are together. That way, you may fully appreciate and enjoy a relationship with someone else without feeling guilty." I had a problem with her new viewpoint since it meant that manipulating people for personal pleasure and benefit was acceptable to her, which it was not for me. This was a side of her I had never seen before, and it caused me to reassess things substantially. "Answer me this, my darling wife," I replied. "Why is it so vital to you that I have an open affair with your consent? Have I done anything so terrible that you are seeking for a reason to break our marriage?" After 5 minutes of stillness, I switched the sound system back on. Melissa, who usually had an answer for everything, was suddenly mute, and I wondered why. I knew there had to be a reason, and my wife wanted me to have an affair, but what? Regardless of the reason, I was convinced that something was seriously wrong in our lives, and I knew I had to find out what was going on. I drove for another hour, and we were about 40 miles from home when I noticed her reach over and turn off the sound again. I reached into my jacket and turned the recorder back on. "I'm sorry, Ethan," Melissa said. "I suppose I've been reading too many romance novels. Those ideas must have appeared out of nowhere." Melissa, our 3 kids, and I all knew she disliked those books because they had been her mother's favorite. Melissa had always called them trashy and considered herself above them, so whenever her mother passed the latest ones to her, she brought them home and threw them away. She turned the sound system back on, thinking that was the end of the conversation. As I drove the last 40 miles, I realized the only thing I didn't know much about was her Saturday night outings with her friends, which had never seemed important enough to worry about. On the rare occasions I was home, she gladly adjusted her plans to stay in with me. Until now, I had no reason to question those nights because I trusted her completely, but after our conversation, I now had a reason to wonder what those girls' nights out were all about. Was she bar hopping? When we arrived home, I knew I had to find out what was going on during her nights out. We pulled into the driveway just as my parents arrived with our kids, and I made my parents a whiskey and soda while they told me about their weekend with the kids. For my parents, spending quality time with their grandchildren was priceless, as they believed the grandchildren kept them young and updated. Each activity was tailored to what the kids wanted, exposing my parents. "Ethan," my father asked gently, "when would be a good time for us to stop by your office tomorrow for a private conversation?" "I have job interviews all day," I said. "How about 3? "Whatever it is, I'm here for you," I heard my dad say. "It's not about your mom and me, it's something involving your wife and her youngest daughter." "I shouldn't say anymore since she's monitoring us." "Okay, Dad. He'll come over after work, and we should be able to sort it out in half an hour," I shouted, loud enough for Melissa to hear through the window. After seeing them go, I returned inside, grabbed my vehicle keys, and placed my toolbox in the trunk. "Hey honey," I was saying. "I need to stop by Dad's tomorrow to fix something after work, so I might be a little late." "Late?" Melissa responded, "Don't worry, we can have dinner later." I heard from the window. My father and mother came on time and were led into my office, where we sat and waited for one of the staff members to bring us coffee. After it was delivered, Laura closed the office door and left. "Ethan," my father said, "I really regret the dumb choice to send in our grandchildren's DNA. They discovered a match for Hannah. She has a grandmother on her father's side who is looking for her son and his descendants." With that, he gave me an Ancestry.com document including a woman's name and phone number. My father could see from my look that I was saddened by the news. "Dad, I do not believe this is an error." "Let's see what we can find out," I said, using the office phone. I phoned the number, activating both the recording and speaker features to guarantee I had a permanent record of the discussion. The call was answered after 2 rings. "My name is Maxwell Davis and I'm searching for Mrs. Margaret Foster about a DNA match identified via Ancestry.com, I stated. "May I talk with her, please?" "You're speaking to her, young guy," the lady said. "How can I assist you?" "It's complicated," I said. "To put it briefly, I just found out that my youngest daughter is your granddaughter." "Are you referring to Hannah Marie Davis?" she asked. "Yes, I am," I said. "Then you might know my son, whom I had to give up for adoption when I was just 14, she told me. "I might if I knew his name," I told her. "He was adopted by the Carter family. His given name was Luke Michael." Mrs. Jones disclosed, and my face paled as my parents' eyes welled up with tears. We all knew the name, and a straightforward admission had suddenly turned into a nightmare for me. "He's alive and well," I responded, "and presently serves as the district attorney in Madison County, Illinois. He is also my wife's boss." "I think I now understand why he never married," she said. "He's my only child," she added. "I have stage 4 lung cancer and don't have much time left. Would you allow Hannah to see me before I die? If necessary, I am happy to pay for her trip. I'd want to meet with her to guarantee she gets my inheritance." Mrs. Jones said, "Given the circumstances, I'll have you coordinate with my parents, as you're only 1 state away. They may take her on a special weekend vacation where you can meet her." I said, "I don't believe I'd allow my daughter undertake this journey alone." Is there anything more you require from me? Have a notary prepare a statement allowing my lawyer to conduct a DNA test, Mrs. Jones told me. Because of the value of Hannah's inheritance, he'll need confirmation before changing my will. Not a problem. I'll hand this call over to my father now, I replied. He can make the arrangements and get directions. I rose up, exited my office, and gave Laura my personal recorder. Get this conversation and the phone call that is still recording transcribed and notarized. I'll need them prepared for divorce court. Do you also want me to prepare the authorization for the DNA test? Laura asked. Laura was clever and understood that when I put on the recording, she was to surreptitiously listen in, an approach that had previously helped settle numerous conflicts. Yes, I said, but we need to keep it quiet for a few weeks. I need to know what my soon-to-be ex-wife has been doing on Saturday evenings. I entered my assistant's office and said, James, I need to speak with you and your wife as soon as possible. I'll need both of your help on a personal subject. James glanced at me and realized what I needed was serious. She should be finishing her dispatching shift soon, James said me. I'll text her to come over right away. I returned to my office and we finalized the plan using the house key they had for my place. They would pack clothes for Hannah and leave next Saturday, and I would have her picked up from school and dropped off at their house by 10. I was seeing my parents out when James' wife arrived, and I asked her to go into his office, where I joined them shortly after. Laura had already transcribed and prepared copies, thanks to modern technology, and I handed a copy to James and Rebecca, suggesting they start by reading the conversation between my wife and me. I also gave Laura the document my father had given me so she could make photocopies for my lawyer's file, which we were now assembling, and asked her to find the best attorney for the situation. Rebecca and James had known my wife and me for years, and they were visibly shaken. Rebecca and Melissa had grown up as neighbors, and although they weren't especially close, they knew each other well. Rebecca was stunned by today's findings. Do you believe they are still connected after all this time? Rebecca inquired. Or might it have been a circumstance in which they get entangled in something and subsequently regretted it? I'm not sure, but I'll need both of your help to find out, I told you. For the next 3 weeks, James, I need you to drive my corporate vehicle on sales travels. Rebecca, I will have to drive your automobile since no one will recognize it. This implies you will have to drive James' automobile. I'll let the employer know that this is part of your cross-training. James, you will be doing this for the next 4 months. You intend to follow your wife on Saturday evenings and capture what you discover. Shall still assume you're out on your normal excursions, James added. My instinct tells me this is still going on because why else would she suddenly advise that I have an affair with her permission? If Carter hadn't changed professions, nothing would have changed, I remarked. I believe Melissa may be preparing to relocate with Daniel Robert Brooks once he begins working in Kansas City. If she can establish I had an affair, she has grounds to file for divorce. Wow, Rebecca said. I can totally picture Melissa doing something like that. In today's culture, it is typical to accuse someone of what you have done yourself. It's an efficient strategy to draw attention away from your own conduct. Ethan, if you uncover proof on one of those Saturday evenings, Rebecca continued, contact me, and I'll have dispatch send a couple of cops to see her and her boyfriend, claiming you were in a vehicle accident. That way, I can provide you with a thorough police record on their condition of clothing or undress, as well as where they were discovered. Some policemen would want to get revenge on the district attorney for how he has handled them in the past. Kathy jumped in, saying, Gregory Adams left the district attorney's office 4 months ago because he could no longer work for him. He began his own practice. I faxed him everything we have acquired thus far, and he is waiting for you. You should leave, Ethan. Send my love and best wishes to Dale, Rebecca said, tell him we still miss him. I went out to meet the man who was now preparing to go to the Supreme Court over the woman's right to life case regarding Roe v. Wade. His unique approach to the law had been turning everything he touched on its head, and things started to come into focus. Melissa and I began having issues in our marriage right after she started working for Luke Carter, and that was around the time I was promoted to sales manager and began my 27-hour turnaround trips for sales meetings. Dale was waiting when I arrived. Rebecca had already informed him about our plans. Dale even handed me a key to Luke Carter's house and the code to override the alarm system if needed. He also gave me a slip of paper with a phone number explaining it belonged to someone who could provide services at a reasonable cost. He mentioned that he had already contacted them and they were expecting my call. He shared that his background on the streets meant he still had the right connections to make things happen. The codes for Carter's house would be valid until the end of next week, when Carter would get his regular reminder to update his security. Dale planned to sue Carter for child support dating back to Hannah's birth, which would be financially devastating for him. Under state law, child support debt couldn't be wiped out through bankruptcy. Dale intended to sue Melissa for adultery, marital abandonment, and fraud for knowingly passing off Carter's daughter as mine. He suggested I temporarily transfer my parental rights for Hannah to my parents until the court case was settled. When I asked why, he explained, "This way, they can't claim you're using Hannah as leverage against them. I know Luke will pursue you as severely as possible. He'll handle you the same way he's treated others, throw the book at them for small crimes. Sometimes the most effective defense is a powerful offensive." I offered to use my debit card as a down payment for Dale's services, but he warned against it, saying Melissa would see the transaction immediately away and may catch on. Instead, he recommended I write a check, which he would keep until they were served. Laura had found me the best lawyer for the job, and I sensed Dale had his own reasons for pursuing Luke Carter as hard as he did. Both Melissa and Luke were about to face a storm they couldn't have predicted, and Dale had effectively set his own plan in motion. I was waiting for Rebecca to arrive in her old 2003 Ford Escape. James had already left for his first sales trip, and Rebecca would leave her car with me and drive James home. My oldest had informed me that their mother would not be home for dinner because Ethan, Rebecca replied, "Dispatch and all of the police are on board. Just tell me where." "Thanks," I told them. Dale said to call him when we're ready so he can serve them personally. "I'm curious why Dale is so eager to take down Luke Carter," I said. "For Dale, it's about principle," Rebecca added. "Luke doesn't stick to his word." It was interesting to watch Melissa and Luke leave separately, only to meet at Harper's Bistro for a steak dinner afterward. They parted ways temporarily. I positioned myself near Luke Carter's house and waited. Dale's connections, now my team, were prepared, and I had a clear view of Luke's home. Melissa arrived first. She entered the code to disable the alarm and used her key to unlock the door. We filmed her just long enough to confirm her entrance. About 10 minutes later, Luke drove up, and Melissa opened the door for him. Her blouse was fully unbuttoned and she wasn't wearing a bra, revealing her cleavage. Luke embraced Melissa and gave her a deep kiss, his hands moving to touch her chest. I stopped recording as they closed the door. 6 of the 8 rooms in Luke's house were wired with video and audio. We were using the neighbor's house as a base, thanks to their son, who was serving time and agreed to let us use the space. Everything happening in Carter's house was being streamed live to any Facebook pages they were associated with. We learned that they had a team following my car, expecting me to take the bait and look for a new romantic interest. Melissa knew my schedule well, so they had planted a woman who matched my type. I texted Rebecca about what I had overheard, and she called James to inform him that he was being watched. James, a former Marine, took immediate action and safely drove off the road at 10 p.m., calling for a tow truck. James then reported the accident to Rebecca, who police officers came, lights blazing, and banged on the door, asking for Melissa Davis. Luke attempted to deny her existence, but the officers pointed out that her vehicle was in the driveway. Melissa eventually emerged at the door, covered only in a bedsheet. "Mrs. Melissa Davis, your husband Maxwell's automobile was involved in a motor vehicle collision in Harrisonville, Missouri. When you couldn't be reached, your parents suggested we check for you here," the officer stated. I felt a sense of satisfaction as I watched Melissa's face turn pale, knowing that the police officer had purposefully misled her in order to make both her and Luke uncomfortable. After the officers left, I followed their car for a short distance, as everything had been recorded and streamed live on Facebook from the moment they arrived until they left. We now had solid evidence of the ongoing affair, as did the residents of Springfield. Around midnight, my eldest son, Nathan, phoned and said, "Dad, Mom isn't home yet, and all my calls are going to voicemail. I'm concerned since she's never been this late. What will I do?" "Call Luke Carter's cell and ask him to put your mother on the line," I said, texting her his number. "What's her boss role in this?" Nathan inquired. "Has been her Saturday night boyfriend for over 17 years, I informed her. I hung up and gave Nathan a tape from a burner phone showing Melissa in a bedsheet speaking to the police while Luke stood close in just pajama bottoms. 10 minutes later, Nathan phoned back and said Mom's phone suddenly started working. She phoned to say she was on Central Main Street with 4 flat tires. I realized she was lying and remarked that couldn't be true because it's nowhere near Luke Carter's place. She swore she was speaking the truth, so I informed her, I saw the video of you and your lover talking to the police. She inquired, what clip? So I emailed it to her. Mom could not explain why she was covered in a bed sheet. I don't believe she'll be home for a long, but could you please open the front door? I inquired as I stepped out of the automobile. Nathan saw me and watched as I pulled my luggage from the trunk and proceeded toward her. Just as I set the suitcase down, my phone rang. It was Gregory Adams, and I answered and put the call on speaker. Ethan, I just served them both at his residence, Dale said. Your wife and her lover are now prohibited from coming within 500 feet of you or any of your children. I will inform the Springfield Police Department before returning home. Don't talk to her at all, Dale told me. If she shows up, even to collect her belongings, call the police. Understood, I said. And so does my oldest son. Thanks, Dale, I said. Nathan, could you please open the garage so I can park Rebecca's car inside? I inquired. I'm meant to be at Harrisonville. So we went there. Ethan, is that why the locksmith arrived at 6 to replace the locks? Nathan inquired. Yes, it was a last-minute decision, I told you. Laura arranged it when it became clear that things would unfold as planned. What caused all of this? Nathan inquired. Your grandfather's DNA test was forwarded to Ancestry.com, I said. They discovered a match for Hannah. He informed me about it at work on Monday. When I contacted the lady, we discovered that your mother's employer is her son, whom she had given up for adoption when she was 14. We lowered the lights and walked into the kitchen to chat softly. Melissa and I had a discussion on the way back from Seattle, and hearing her remarks in her own voice was eye-opening. Nathan broke down, and I held him until he calmed down. Why would Mom want you to have an affair, Father? Nathan inquired. To lessen the impact of her own if it was ever discovered, I advised. It's ironic that her suggestion is what led to the truth coming out. We were interrupted by a light tap on the door, which Nathan answered since I wasn't meant to be there. It was a police officer who informed us that they had stopped a cab carrying Melissa and advised her that if she went any further, she would be breaking a court order. My eldest son and I spent the night talking about everything, and we both agreed that Melissa could have become a writer, considering how many tales she recounted about her girls' nights out. I still can't believe Mom has had an ongoing affair with the same man for over 17 years, Nathan remarked. How did we not notice it? It was easy, I said. You kids were little, and I was constantly traveling as the sales manager, with weekly meetings in various states. I trusted her and our relationship enough not to question her going out with friends. We all trusted her. Nathan responded, that's why we were blind to what was happening behind the scenes. I sat there stunned till Nathan stated it. I had no idea Melissa had taken advantage of our faith in her to continue the affair for so long. Nathan saw the tears in my eyes and replied, that is what hurts the most. It's not about the affair or the Fosses. It's recognizing that she utilized our trust as a tactic to maintain the one connection that was really important to her. If your mother could do that to people she claimed to love, I joked, imagine what she'll do to us when she starts resenting us for what she's about to go through. When Nathan got up to make new coffee, I observed the first glimmer of morning, and my phone buzzed with a text message. It's from your mother, I said, and she wants to chat as soon as possible. Says there's a problem with our oldest that has to be addressed before I return from my vacation. How will you respond? Nathan inquired, apprehensive. Don't worry, be happy, I remarked during my typing session. You and Luke can still laugh about the big doofus behind my back. I sent her with the following message: you can still move to Kansas City with Luke Carter as you planned all along, just not with the kids. Nathan glanced at me in surprise. Your mother didn't need me longer, I explained. I'd fulfilled my role. She wanted me to initiate an affair so she could use it against me in divorce proceedings. She never thought she'd be caught after all this time. It must have been painful for Nathan to hear what I sent her mother, I thought. Most people can't confront raw truth, they strike out at whomever discloses it. but, with time, acceptance emerges. I took Nathan into my arms as he began to wail again, and we were able to soothe him down just as Liam and Hannah awoke. I switched on the kitchen TV to watch the morning news, as I normally did, and they joined us for breakfast, startled to find me at home. We were all caught aback when my wife's picture came on the television. My son cranked up the volume out of curiosity. My heart dropped for my kids when I heard Luke and Melissa talking about me. Melissa just stated, "The doofus is such an idiot. He is completely unaware of what is going on around him." Their mother then made a snarky remark about it, which made them both chuckle. Then the reporter spoke. "I don't think they are laughing anymore," he informed me. After 5 hours of live streaming their long-term affair on Facebook, their plan to set Maxwell Davis up with a professional escort so Melissa could divorce him and take everything has completely backfired. In the following scene, Dale served Melissa and Luke with lawsuits, which the news reporter described in detail. Hannah raced to me and sat on my lap, weeping. It was a horrible way for a 17-year-old to learn that her father was not her biological father, but rather her mother's long-term boyfriend. Liam summed it up by saying, "If you're just a joke to Mom, what does that make the rest of us?" After Hannah had calmed down, Nathan and I discussed everything that had transpired since Melissa and I returned from Seattle, and I phoned their school to excuse them from classes on Saturday and Monday so they could absorb and deal with their feelings. We were about to start breakfast when Hannah said, "Dad, the police chief is on TV." We turned up the volume and the announcement confirmed that both Melissa Davis and District Attorney Luke Carter were now under criminal investigation, with a special task force assembled from across the county to lead the case. When someone's conduct becomes public knowledge, society frequently responds severely, even if they privately tolerate similar activities. Hypocrisy is intertwined throughout our daily lives. After breakfast and cleaning up, I sat my 3 children down at the table and gave them each a copy of the letter my father had received. "Hannah, my parents are going to take you to meet your biological father's mother," I said. "She is dying of cancer and has requested to visit you. There is a compelling explanation for this, but I believe it is better if she explains herself. To me, you are and always will be my daughter. If you have any questions, please ask your grandparents. Nathan, could you please help your sister pack for the weekend while I call my parents?" I inquired as the girls went, and my son remarked, "How are you doing, Dad?" "I'm not," I said. "I'm struggling every second to maintain control. Remember, if you ever go through anything like this as a parent, you must be strong for everyone else." I contacted my parents and explained the situation, and they said they'd come over as soon as they finished packing the vehicle and had about an hour before their trip. I didn't understand it at the time, but my connection with my kid changed for the better, permanently. The 3 of us watched as the kid I had raised departed with my parents to meet her biological grandma for the first time. I hoped everything went well and that she would return feeling the same way about me. The atmosphere at the district attorney's office was bleak. Melissa had gone out to buy new clothes after her car had been towed and the tire valves replaced, and Luke Carter was reading the lawsuit against him. Despite the lack of a direct DNA sample, the biological evidence was linked in a way that left no doubt about his paternity. Everyone in the office now knew about their relationship and the long-standing affair, as well as the hidden truth of Hannah's parentage. In a civil case, Dale was suing Melissa and Luke for failing to disclose relevant facts, and it was becoming clear that they had been deceiving me for years. Every lawyer Luke contacted confirmed that I and Dale were likely to win, but none of them wanted to be involved because many had already heard about Dale's reputation as a formidable opponent. They pointed out that typical defense strategies rely on Melissa had just left her favorite store, known for its high quality and unique clothing, when she was shocked to find a woman approaching her, asking if she was out of her mind for not realizing things were going wrong. The Facebook exposure of Melissa and Luke's behavior, along with their open admission of plotting to ruin an honest man in order to take his assets and live together, may not have meant much on its own, but given Luke's status in the community, it had become front-page news. Melissa returned to Luke's house around 1 p.m. to find a company just wrapping up a service call. They assumed she was the homeowner and advised her and her husband to reset all the security codes in the house. It wasn't until they left that she realized she hadn't been asked for an electronic signature to confirm the visit. She called Luke, wondering who might have orchestrated this to prevent him from securing his new position in Kansas City. When Luke questioned why, she revealed what she'd gotten herself into, and they started to assume that I had engineered the whole affair. They were aware that Luke's new position was a politically linked appointment from powerful persons. Melissa sat down with a coffee in hand to read the divorce petition. The first shock came when she realized it was her own words to me that had made me suspicious, words about hurting and using another person for personal gain. But it was learning that my parents had told me about the DNA match from Ancestry.com that led me to uncover Hannah's true parentage, which was undeniable proof of her long-term affair. Melissa now recognized that I must have known it was her acts that almost wrecked our marriage before Hannah was born, and she knew I was responsible for what occurred the night before and was revealing the hidden secrets of her life. As she took another drink of her coffee, the doorbell rang, and she answered it to find Mr. Langley, Luke's detested neighbor, standing there. "Mr. Langley," she said, "how may I assist you?" He gave her a legal envelope and said, "Your husband Ethan utilized my home as a base for his operation against you and your long-term boyfriend last night. I videotaped him because Luke Carter got my kid condemned to the maximum for a first-time offense. I thought you'd be interested to know that the information in this envelope is being distributed by courier to everyone on your side of the family this afternoon. Ethan asked me to inquire whether you were still laughing at him." Melissa opened the envelope, which was filled with photos of her letting herself into Luke's house with her key, greeting him at the door, their foreplay in the living room, and images of them undressing each other. The photos showed everything, including intimate acts and their confrontation with the police. Ethan's team had been thorough, and the evidence was so comprehensive that it seemed as if he was but the last printed page, signed by her husband, told it all. If it got public, it would cause a slew of difficulties they weren't expecting. Her strategy to compel Ethan to follow her desires was unraveling in the worst manner. "Ethan, I knew last Sunday, by the time we came back from Seattle, that you were attempting to set me up for divorce," Melissa thought. "Since then, I've been trying to figure out what I did that turned your love into such pure hatred. Now I see why. I see you hold me accountable for what you believe was lacking in your life. When we only had 2 children, I think you felt confined in our marriage and missed your carefree single days. Otherwise, you would not have chosen to relive that life with him. You allowed him to take you away from what you disliked for a few hours each week. I realized that the only reason you remained married to a guy you despised and considered as dead was because Luke did not want the responsibility of raising children, even his own. You would not have abandoned them with someone you considered useless. Your pride would not allow it. This resulted in a life founded on deliberate falsehoods, and with each day that you both got away with it, your contempt for me increased. In your eyes, I became an even bigger fool and moron. How frequently did Luke and you laugh at the oblivious husband? Did you stoke his fire by dismissing or insulting me? What I can't forgive or forget is the message you and the guy you call your actual spouse conveyed to our children. It has long-term consequences for them. What I still don't understand is how much fun Luke and you had using me and our children like simple pieces in your game. The KVOX-12 News reporter summed it up perfectly when he asked if you and Luke were still laughing at Ethan Davis' husband, Jonathan Miller. Now, I watched as Nathan, Liam, and Hannah saw the 2 of you reveal your plans for me to the public. It was painful for our children to see you both joke and laugh about how easy it would be to bring down the stupid doofus. Our only son, Liam, stated, "If Mom feels Dad is a worthless piece of rubbish to be let to dry out and then crushed into the ground, what must she think of us?" I haven't asked them what kind of relationship they want to have with you in the future. For the time being, it appears to be non-existent. The contempt and disgust you and Luke showed for me have caused that. At least you can find comfort in knowing you've succeeded in leaving me with the reputation of a hapless fool for the rest of my life. Perhaps the 2 of you can toast to that victory tonight. Melissa's hands trembled so much that she dropped the paper. She came across as spiteful, bitter, hateful, and cruel, with no regard for her children, husband, or anyone else. All she seemed to care about was herself and fulfilling her own desires, and her sobs broke the silence in the room. Ethan had an uncanny ability to dismantle someone's reputation without directly condemning them. No one who read his words could deny the accuracy of his observations about her actions. To Ethan, everything she did appeared to be about maintaining her lifestyle rather than love. He must have realized that Luke was pressuring her to leave him and the children before she became pregnant with Hannah. Luke's new job had pushed them to accelerate their long-term plans. Melissa picked up the divorce petition and continued reading, and it was devastating. One of the lawsuits against them was for fraud due to hiding Hannah's true parentage, and she was also accused of emotional and mental abandonment, adultery, and slander. Ethan believed that their disdain for him was the reason they were attempting to completely ruin him without explicitly saying so. Ethan and his lawyer were proving that he could no longer be treated as the fool they thought he was. Saturday was chaotic for my two oldest and me, from early morning until about 4 in the afternoon. Family members stopped by, Ethan's parents, his two brothers, one sister, and their spouses, to show their support, each bringing a favorite dish to ensure we had food. Even Ethan's brother and sister came from out of town to check on him. We were surrounded by love. Ethan and his father-in-law grabbed a cool beer and strolled out onto the back deck for a bit. "Edward, let it go," he said. "Sandra is inside to give you some privacy, and we'll keep everyone away until you've calmed down." He stayed with Ethan until he felt more composed. "Sandra and I plan to change our will," he said. "What would have been Melissa's share will be split among your 3 children. She's our daughter, but I can't forgive her for who she has become." We had barely finished cleaning the home when Ethan's father phoned. "Hannah met the lady," he said, "and there is definitely a family resemblance." The meeting went nicely. Mrs. Jones was interested in your family's circumstances and encouraged Hannah to express her views. It was nice to see since she had been keeping everything in. The lawyer took the blood sample he needed and then pulled me aside for a private conversation. My father said he asked about Luke Carter, and I shared what we knew. I discovered that Luke's biological father was serving a life sentence for murdering his lover's husband, and Luke would have inherited his biological mother's estate if Hannah hadn't entered her life. "Don't worry, Dad, I told you. Dale Thompson has a court order preventing him from coming within 500 feet of any of us. It's been a busy day here with a lot of relatives from both sides coming over to show their support," my father remarked. "We're staying on Mrs. Jonas' estate as her guests. Your mother feels gratified by the wonderful welcome." Dad responded, "Hannah is now with Mrs. Jones. We both like her." Her lawyer said that it has been a long time since he has seen the magnificent old woman grin. "Hold on, I'm going to pass the phone to your mom," your father said. "I got some time alone to chat with Caroline," my mother said. "She asked what type of son you were, so I told anecdotes about your childhood, trying to be as honest as possible. We went over the events of the last week in detail. She added that you left it up to her to explain why she wanted to meet with Hannah. She stated it had been a long time since a stranger treated her with such respect, and she thanked us for treating the estate problem so sensitively. My mother said that her aim is to put everything in a trust for Hannah, which she will handle until she reaches the age of 28. I texted you when you leave so I can be home when you arrive," my father stated before hanging up. I texted Hannah, "We're all missing you and sending our love." "Dad, we finally had a minute to clean up before James and Rebecca came with my vehicle, and I apologized for not returning it sooner. The police chief is seeing an opportunity to take down Luke Carter," Rebecca said. "He and Dale are collaborating." Dale gave the detectives several dubious leads to look into. When I returned, the workplace was dark and anxious. James continued, "I mentioned that some of us had known about the situation for most of the week and were helping out wherever we could. It's been an emotional rollercoaster here since Saturday night," I said. "The kids are still struggling at times, so I'm taking Monday off as well." "Have you heard from Melissa at all?" Rebecca inquired. "Not since Saturday night," I told her. "She and Luke are probably busy moving on with their lives, given how they've publicly shown what they think of us." My youngest daughter phoned early Sunday morning and asked if it was good for her and her grandparents to come home late on Monday. I agreed as long as her grandparents were comfortable with it, and she thanked me for insisting on her going. I asked her why, and she replied, "Mrs. Jones helped me recognize that it wasn't my fault that my mother's affair brought me into the world. Dad, she made it plain that we are all innocent victims who do not deserve the repercussions of her son's and my mother's acts." "I love you, Daddy," she murmured as she ended the conversation. Hannah, Nathan, and Liam went into the family room to share Hannah's stories about meeting her new grandmother, Giv. I had to admit, it felt good to have my youngest daughter home again. My father opened the trunk and brought in her suitcase, which Liam quickly took to her room. We went to the kitchen, and while I poured a new pot of coffee, my parents recounted their views of Mrs. Jones. "She was at peace when we left," my father remarked. "It was as if she had reached the point where she was ready to accept her death. Meeting Hannah and earning her approval meant a great deal to her. My mother took out a legal-sized envelope from her handbag and gave it to me. This was given to me by her lawyer as per Caroline's instructions. I opened the envelope and found a letter and a check for $50,000. The letter was brief and sincere, and the grand lady expressed her gratitude for granting her request, noting that she had already outlived her expected time. Before I contacted her, the DNA had confirmed the connection, and she described Hannah as a beautiful young woman who had been raised well. She advised me to use the funds to help navigate the difficult period ahead while remaining true to my values. I let my parents read the letter. It was difficult to believe that we had helped fulfill someone's dying wish. Over coffee, I shared everything that had happened while they were away, telling them that I felt the worst was over emotionally and that we would resume our normal routine the next day. The rest of the week went as smoothly as could be expected. Melissa attempted to contact each of the kids by phone but was essentially told not to call again. The corporate head office was overjoyed that I was no longer running the sales meetings and began looking for a new sales manager, and, for the first time in 10 years, one day I was in my office reviewing monthly sales figures when Laura came in and said, "The news has blown up." I glanced up and said, "What now?" "I got an email saying your last letter to Melissa was posted online on the Southeastern Missouri newspaper's website." Laura stood behind me, reading over my shoulder, and by the time she finished, she was in tears. I searched the website and found it under the Speak Out section. "I wrote it when I was emotionally raw," I said. "Maybe I was too harsh." "No, Ethan," Laura answered. "You just expressed what her long-term conduct revealed in an honest and clear manner. Either of them could have terminated it and revealed the truth. Luke reaped the pleasures of a long-term relationship without incurring the cost." "Exactly," I said. "It's rare for society to see the true impact of someone's actions on their family in such a public way." "For those of us who have been through divorce," Laura said, "it's a stark reminder of the pain and suffering we endured before moving forward." I read the final remark on the page aloud. "As a feminist for the majority of my life, I have pushed for equality and empowerment. What this woman and her lover did to her husband and children has left an indelible mark on our movement." Melissa and Luke went to the Oakwood Tavern for supper. Normally, the establishment would be busy on a Saturday night, but today, there were just vacant tables around them. When they questioned the waitress why, she said, "We have people waiting who don't want to be seen dining near you too. I believe it's because most people saw your husband's final letter to you on the Southeastern Missourian newspaper's website." Melissa and Luke quickly asked for the bill and left, knowing they would need to avoid public places for a while. As they walked out, Melissa noticed her parents at a table waiting for their meal, and she approached them with Luke following behind. Her father looked up and said, "Mr. Carter, please take your mistress and go so my wife and I may dine in peace." Melissa left the restaurant in tears, realizing that once you go too far, there's no coming back, and that she and Luke would have to live with the repercussions of their actions. Back at Luke's house, they checked up the comments on the internet and witnessed firsthand the public's outrage and contempt for them. 3 months later, I sat in the passenger seat of my car, watching Hannah drive. We were on our way to Wichita, Kansas, after learning that her grandmother, Caroline, had died. We were headed to the airport to catch a private plane arranged by the estate. Hannah was taking it hard, as they had grown close through their frequent phone calls since her visit. Nathan and Liam had been a huge support, and as a result, the four of us were becoming closer as a family. Luke and Melissa had relocated to Kansas City, where they were living in a modest 2-bedroom rented apartment, preparing for the possibility of bankruptcy due to the upcoming civil suit. The federal authorities had allowed Luke to begin his job early, and the county was happy to see him go as long as he repaid more than $45,000 in questionable expenses. Under Missouri bankruptcy laws, they could only keep up to $10,000 in equity each. Our divorce was settled in accordance with state law. Melissa had learned the hard way that people will only tolerate so much before walking away for good. Hannah had endured a state-arranged meeting with her biological father, which did not go well for him. Hannah told him that her grandmother had said he was just like his father, a narcissist who shouldn't be around any woman in front of child services representatives. We attended Hannah's grandmother's funeral, and the lawyer revealed the full extent of her inheritance, which was overwhelming for both of us. As trustees, we decided to sell her grandmother's home and its contents, with the exception of her personal jewelry and a few photos Hannah wanted to keep. Back at home, the school year was drawing to a conclusion and I was getting ready for the first day of court on Saturday when Hannah entered the den. "Dad, could you arrange for Luke, Mom, their attorneys, and the two of us to meet with Dale on Tuesday?" Hannah inquired. "I think so, but why?" I said. "I want them to see the real cost of what they did," she stated. "Grandma Caroline suggested it to me. I phoned Dale and we scheduled a meeting with Luke, Melissa, and their attorneys on a bright and beautiful day. I had requested this meeting." Hannah started. "To my biological father, I have something for you. It is the location of your father and his plea that you visit him in jail. He is receiving a life sentence for murdering his lover's spouse. You should be aware that you were created as a consequence of maltreatment by a distant relative when she was 14. Hannah gave Luke the sealed package with his name on it, and the looks on Luke's and Melissa's faces were memorable. "You both should know that my biological grandmother left me over $100 million in a trust managed by my father, Jonathan Miller, until I turned 28, Hannah went on. "Luke, it would have been yours if she hadn't found out about me. When she learnt of my pregnancy and its circumstances, her high moral values took precedence. That was when she left you out of her will. What you both did was disgusting." "Dale Thompson, my trust will cover my father's legal expenses," Hannah said. "Luke and Mom, you should consider mediation before going to court, because if necessary, we'll go all the way to the Supreme Court. Mother, even if you brought me into this world via sin, it does not make it right. Fortunately, my biological grandma helped me realize that my father's ideals, ethics, and standards are what characterize me. I left that meeting feeling both pleased and humbled. My daughter had spoken all that needed to be said, and whatever occurred tomorrow didn't matter since I recognized now that I had what truly important. Thank you for watching. What would you have done in this situation? Tell us in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe.